Hi everyone, welcome back to the Casual Watch Review channel. Today we have somewhat of an icon to review, specifically this Mondaine official Swiss Railways automatic. This is a Sellita powered 40mm watch currently retailing for $650. I've been wanting to see one of these watches in person for a long time. My father started his working life as a graphic designer, and I remember seeing the clock this watch is based on adorning the pages of many of his design reference books he had. I'm very happy to be adding this watch to his modest collection after the review, as it was very generously sent into the show by Mondaine themselves, so a big thanks to them. Let's start with a brief history of this watch. The design may seem familiar to most, but its origins are very interesting. In 1944, Hans Hilfiger, a Swiss engineer and designer, was employed by the Federal Swiss Railways. During his time there, he created a clock which has become known as the official Swiss Railways clock. The clock itself was specifically designed for the Swiss Railway, and since then it has become somewhat of a Swiss national icon. It's been included among examples of outstanding 20th century design by both the Design Museum in London and the Museum of Modern Art in New York. My book that you have seen in the background of many of my uploads even lists the design and Mondaine's watch as one of the 50 watches that changed the world. The clock itself was designed to specifically service the Swiss railways. And for example, trains in Switzerland always leave the station on the full minute, and the clock at the railway stations have to run synchronously in order to show reliable time for both passengers and the railway staff. The station clock is synchronized by receiving an electrical impulse from a central master clock at each full minute that advances the minute hand forward. The second hand is driven by an electrical motor independent of this electrical signal. So interestingly, the second hand rotates in full about 58.5 seconds. It then pauses briefly at the 12 o'clock position. It starts a new rotation as soon as the minute hand is moved by its signal from the master clock. This particular feature is so iconic of the clock that Mondaine have emulated this in some of the other quartz-based watches that they make. In 1986, the Mondaine watch company owned by the Bernheim family was inspired by the patented design of the railway clock that they turned it into a watch collection with official license, of course, from the Federal Swiss Railways. So let's get back to the present day and the watch we have here. The watch features the tried and tested Sellita SW220-1 movement with a day-date complication. If you're not familiar with Sellita, they started out making movements based on ETA's out-of-patent automatic movements. They are now one of the leading movement makers and produce more movements annually than Rolex. In fact, during 2019, Sellita produced and supplied 1 million mechanical movements. That was roughly twice as many as ETA. There is various factors at play, including a brush with the Swiss Competition Commission for ETA, but nevertheless an impressive number for Sellita, a fairly recent addition to the industry, comparatively speaking. On the reverse of this watch, you can see that movement through the exhibition case back. What is strange, I would say, for a watch coming in at $650 is we don't see a sapphire crystal front or back, just a hardened mineral crystal. Now, I wondered whether this was linked to the fact that these automatic variants are at the top of the collection price-wise, with the majority of the other models being quartz-based in the $300 or lower price range, but nevertheless, it is a shame not to have sapphire crystal on a watch of this price. The dimensions are very contemporary, 40mm with a 20mm lug width. Here's the lug to lug. Now, the watch does have some depth to it, which I quite like. The case itself is very well finished with polishing all over. The case design is iconic to the design, of course, although this version is more refined than the usual, more geometric ones that they sell. Now, the only point I would make is I wish the crown was slightly bigger. It could be easier to grip. It's not that easy to hand wind, honestly. Now, if you're just wearing it without hand winding in, then it would only cause you an issue when you were going to set the time. A bigger crown would balance the case better, as the hands and dial make such a statement on this watch. The crown is not screw down. The watch has a 30-meter water resistance, so maybe don't go on a vigorous swim with this one. On the dial, we see the brand name, then some curious letters: SSB, CFF, FFS. All these letters refer to the Swiss Federal Railways and the three acronyms used when translated into German, French, and Italian respectively. So SSB is the German translation, CFF is the French translation, and FFS is the Italian translation. They all refer to the National Railway Company of Switzerland. It's usual to see it referred to by all of these initials or just some of them. So this is just another nod to the history of the watch and adds a nice dimension to the dial. The dial itself is of course very iconic, mirroring the clock exactly. We of course have the distinctive red second hand, designed originally after the red paddle the conductors used to signal the train drivers. The hands are rectangular with a taper towards the end. The minute hand meets the minute markers perfectly, which is very satisfying. If you like the design, then it's been extremely well executed here, and I guess it should be, considering that they have been perfecting these watches since 1986. Of course, it's a very high contrast dial itself, so it will be easier to see in low light, but there is no lume on this watch at all. The clock it's designed after is backlit on the train platforms, but this watch is not. For a dress watch, this is typical to have no lume. I would put this in the dress watch category, or maybe a casual dress watch. The watch is sporting a leather strap. This is just to be expected, simple but functional, nothing that really stands out about it. It has quick release pins, which means swapping it out of the strap is very easy. This would look nice on a mesh bracelet or even a NATO. I'm really glad to have got to review one of these watches finally, and it didn't disappoint. If you love the design, then this automatic is a great choice. You also have many other variants, including a really cool one that is made of partially recycled plastics that caught my eye. Now, if you want that iconic pausing of the second hand like the clock has, then I would go for one of the stop to go variants. Interestingly, those ones do have sapphire crystal, which is weird. Let me know what you think in the comments section down below, and thanks for watching. See you next time.